Aloha and welcome back to another episode of the Ohana Packers Edition podcast. We are here for our week one preview of the Packers season opener in Brazil against the Philadelphia Eagles. Joe is running on minimal sleep and I am catching up on sleep from my trip. So basically we're off to our usual start. Joe, as we're recording this, I know that these will come out. The one we recorded yesterday is coming out tomorrow. This one will come out on Thursday. I know we just talked about this opener, but we're going to go more in depth about it. So it's a little bit of a departure from how I did it last year because I don't find that it'll be much use pulling up like the in-season stats because there are none. And I know that this is a different team from what Philly, a lot of the key pieces are the same, but they are running some replacements for veterans who have retired onto their future or post NFL life. So, but as we usually do, we'll start out with just the Packers. And unlike our normal one, the Packers are actually done with their practice this week because of the fact that the game is on Friday. So this will be dropping Thursday, but we're recording this on Tuesday, like I said. And they are flying out tomorrow at the time of this recording. So as it stands, today's practice, Edge Cooper, Romeo Doubs, Carrington Valentine, and Emmanuel Wilson were all limited participants. Of those, Doubs was listed as, I wouldn't even put it touch and go. He said that he has a hand contusion, but he was able to do a little more with it than they figured he would. So he's thinking he'll be fine to play on Friday. And Wilson was the one LaFleur called out and said he did everything pretty well in Tuesday's practice and expects him to be a full go. Marshawn Lloyd was the lone DNP. LaFleur did say that this was part of the plan and it's not a setback, as Marshawn did participate in practice on Sunday and then on Monday before being a DNP today. He was present and riding the bike on the side during when the team was doing stretching, and which is the only part that's open to the media. But he did not go outside with the rest of the team. But honestly, not bad. Better than they were a year before, where you go into week one with the Bakhtiari pitch count practice pitch count situation, and Doubs and Watson both dealing with hamstring injuries and stuff. So overall, they are in a better place, I think, in terms of health. And my notes are a little off on this. I completely forgot that they added Pirine to the practice squad to kind of counteract McCrary going to the IR. They did sign Chris Brooks today, and that was more to counteract the fact that Messiah Swinson got signed away by Carolina. Little surprising in that sense that Joe Wilson didn't get brought back, or just another tight end, but I think it goes to show where the team is with the guys on the roster. Pretty confident in the room of Musgrave, Kraft, and Sims. And then just wanting to get a little bit more shoring up at the running back position on the practice squad. I know that Brooks and Pirine can't really be expected to play so quickly, but just to kind of be backup options behind Merriweather on the practice squad with Lloyd's status up in the air. And I know that LaFleur has said, we're going to give Lloyd the full week, but that would hold a little more water if he was a veteran, even a second-year player where he's been in the system a whole year kind of thing. I take that as a little bit more of lip service for a rookie who has already missed half of preseason. So I don't really expect Marshawn Lloyd to play come Friday. I think he'll just be in street clothes, get to experience it, and they'll probably just try to ramp him up for the home opener next week. But that's it for the team updates. Joe, anything I missed that you wanted to bring up, or what?
No, I'm not. When did the Doubs injury? I saw it earlier, but when did the Doubs injury pop up? Because that one's a new one.
We're in that whole weird area where, because it's the NFL's stupid rules where it's not the number of practices in the week that have to report it. It's the Wednesday practice, the Wednesday, Thursday, Friday practice that has to be reported. So I don't think they had reports necessarily, official reports for Sunday and Monday's practice, and Wednesday is the last practice of the week because they're spending all of Thursday traveling, and then Friday's the game. Or all of Wednesday is traveling. Thursday, I think they're only doing like team meetings, and then Friday is the game. So, today was like the first we really heard of it that he was, at all limited, because Sunday and Monday, the report was just, back-to-back days of all 53 active roster players are participating in practice. So he probably jammed a finger or like went down and had someone step on his head, one of those kind of things. So the fact that he's just, quote unquote, working through it, actively working through it in practice, I think is a pretty positive sign. And, we haven't heard the dreaded, like, he needs x-rays or MRIs or anything like that.
Oh,
we've lost Joe. Anyhow, we will try to carry this on and we'll touch base with Joe when he gets back in here. But yeah, so as I said, that takes care of the roster and injury updates for the Packers heading into week 1. So we'll just dive into the Eagles portion of the preview. And so as I noted in the opening, the two big names that the Eagles are replacing are just what have been two guys that have been absolute pillars for their organization. One on each side of the line of scrimmage. Jason Kelce retired, and Fletcher Cox retired. So 2 of the 4 guys that were left from their 2017 Super Bowl roster have rode off into the sunset, leaving Lane Johnson and Brandon Graham as the last 2 guys that are holdovers from that team. This Eagles team, they started out 10-1 or 11-1 last season, but then had a horrible slide down the stretch of the season. And we kind of mentioned it in the season preview. There was all kind of stuff that came out of it where the coordinators didn't gel with the players. Their head coach had to kind of mend fences with, with some of the key roster members. It was just not a good situation for the Eagles as they closed the 2023 season, and they just went out sad wet fart trombones in the that Monday night playoff game against the Bucs, where if you had told me that they lost by 40, I would have believed you as much as they lost by 9 or something like that. So that being said, on paper, this is still a very dangerous team, and it's one of the reasons why Joe and I are split on our decision of who would win this game. It's very much up to it's week 1, so there's going to be some weirdness. But on paper, this is still a very talented roster and one that is looking to put the end of last season in the rearview mirror. So, keeping with the theme of how this roster has been built, we're going to go front to back. And on offense, that O-line, as much as Jason Kelce retiring is a big blow to them, they still have a formidable starting 5 unit. 4 of those guys are in-house players. Mailata is a just massive left tackle. They probably have the best offensive tackle tandem in the league with Mailata and Johnson manning the 2 tackles. Dickerson is at left guard. Cam Jurgens is the guy who is stepping up to replace Jason Kelce. Jurgens, I believe he was drafted in 2022, so he's been groomed in-house over the past couple seasons. And I think Kelce on his podcast, the Eagles internally have both sides have kind of stated that they expect a good high level of play from Jurgens this season and that he's ready to take over the role. And their one outside signing is Mekhi Becton, who had previously been the left tackle for the Jets, but has dealt with massive injury issues the past few seasons, and now is trying to find his way with a with a new organization. So he is not only making the transition from the left side to the right side, but also reducing inside from tackle to guard. So but what that does is this Eagles O-line is just a massive unit, and it sets up a lot of what they want to do with keeping Jalen Hurts healthy, allowing him time to throw the ball, and we finally have Joe back. So Joe, I've been kind of just circling around the fact that this Eagles O-line is the centerpiece of their offense, and basically anything and everything they do is built on the back of this unit. Going from the brotherly shove and all that kind of stuff to Hurts's option game to buying him time to throw in the pocket. And I think that'll be one of the key matchups for the Packers defense against this Eagles offense is who's able to, whether the Eagles are winning the line of scrimmage or if Green Bay is able to stalemate and or penetrate at the line of scrimmage to disrupt their run game and get Hurts under pressure because he is still a little turnover prone. So that's where I think the key on the for the Packers matchup against the Eagles offense is. But how do you see that unit to unit matchup looking?
The offensive line, like I was saying in our other episode for the 53, or not the 53, when we were doing our season predictions, this is not the team I want to go against in the first game of the season in the new system, because they do have all these weapons and the groups are formidable in that. The offensive line is there, the wide receiver groups. You can even kind of point a little bit to the tight end groups, even though that and the running backs are probably the weakest part of the weakest part of their team, the offense. But if preseason was any indicator with just the twos, then it looks like the Packers are going to be able to get a ton of pressure no matter what, because they pretty well handled the Denver offensive line, being it was their number one starters and so on. And now that we're going to be seeing Clark, TJ Slayton, Preston, Ron, be able to rotate them in and out fairly well. So it's going to be tough. And I wish it was it was like college where you could get a warm-up game. And I'm not talking like preseason as warm-up. I'm talking like
play nowhere directional state team. Yeah.
Yeah, like Montana State University out of Bison or whatever.
Yeah. Or when you put two directionals in front of a school's state name kind of thing, when it's not Northwestern, something university. Yeah.
Boost to say, hey, everything's coming together, everything's being cohesive, and so on. So I'm not looking forward to it per se. I'm just hoping that the Hafley defense is going to be able to adjust to anything the Eagles' offensive line throws at them, because that was the biggest knock with Barry, is Barry couldn't adjust to anything. Obviously, they played a very vanilla defense during the preseason, so we have no clue he's going to actually bring to this defense, other than they were tackling a lot better. So, we'll see what happens. Like I said, I'm not overly worried about the run game. Do have Saquon and Gainwell, but Saquon has never really lived up to his hype because of the injuries, and Gainwell is do what he's going to do. So it doesn't scare me too much. And the tight ends, I'm not overly worried about the tight ends too much either. It's the A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, Jahan Dotson. Who else is on? They've got another wide receiver didn't they just draft one this year too?
They drafted Johnny Wilson from Florida State, who is like kind of a Lazard type, where it's like, is he a receiver? Is he a really small tight end, or is he a really big receiver kind of thing? So yeah, they've added more options to that room, and excuse me. So yeah, that's going to be the key, so I put up the key matchup being the, our D line against their O line, because if Philly is able to control the line of scrimmage, none of the stuff that I really say after this is going to matter. But if Green Bay if our defensive front can stymie that O line and win some of those individual battles, it gives us a shot to cover some of these weapons on the back end. Like you said, predominantly A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith, because Jair can only cover one of them, and in this case, I do think he could cover either one. Best guess is he's probably, and we still don't know. They haven't really given much of an indication, but I don't think they're going to match coverages. I still think that they're going to try to play sort of like he's got a side and Stokes or Valentine, probably Stokes because Valentine's been injured, gets the other side of the field. But it would be interesting to see if they do kind of match it up because AJ is a little bit of a better matchup for Stokes, and I think while Ja could cover either, I think Devonta Smith is a better it's better to have Jair on Devonta Smith. The more interesting part is going to be who covers Goddard, because when healthy, Goddard has been a matchup problem. Basically, he's been what we want Musgrave to become, where he's too big for linebackers and safety and cornerbacks, and too athletic for safeties and linebackers, or too big for safeties and cornerbacks, and too athletic for linebackers, and he just goes into that, especially when mixed with Brown and Smith. You're kind of like, okay, who gets the double team? Who gets extra attention? And in Hafley's system, I know it's not necessarily straight man coverage, but there's a lot of match zone, which plays like man coverage. So I'm curious to see how he's going to line up initially. And the big one, like you said, Joe, is how quickly and how able is Hafley to make adjustments if his fastball isn't working. So that's really what we don't know, because most of these guys didn't play in the preseason, and we didn't, he, like you said, he kept it very vanilla, very much just learn the plays, make plays on your own kind of thing, which I'm totally fine with in the preseason, but this is the nitty gritty, finer details that, we nerd out to in terms of learning what a coach has really got in his back pocket. And like you noted, for the running backs, Barkley is a little bit more name than he is substance at this point, predominantly because of the injuries and the fact that New York had nothing outside of him on offense. But he has had solid games against the Packers in the past, especially, that London game. He really was the catalyst for that turnaround where New York was able to just storm past Green Bay in the second half of that London game. And Gainwell is just a physical running back. So just curious to see how we're going to match up. Do we open in nickel? I do think that Hafley will want to open in his 2-4-5, whether you call it a 2-4-5 or a 4-2-5 look, it's a nickel look. I think Hafley would prefer to open that way, but it's going to be dependent on if our D-line can protect the back seven players, because if the Philly O-line is able to control the line of scrimmage, we're going to get played out of our sub packages really quickly. So that's why, I keep coming back to it, that's the key matchup when we're on defense on Friday.
Well, to answer your question about who would cover Goddard, this may sound really weird considering he didn't play a lot in the preseason and he is coming off injury. I would do a combination of Catan and Quay, because Catan is listed at 6'2", 216, and Quay is 6'4", 241. So between the two of them, I think they could handle Goddard and his 256.
Mm-hmm.
So, and he is getting a little age on him too, so, and the injury bugs and everything else. But I think, if anything, I think Quay could handle it, because I think Quay's got the speed at linebacker to be able to handle it. But if they decide that they want to throw an extra safety out there, you would hope McKinney would be able to handle him because they know each other. Like you were mentioning, or not you mentioned, Carlos's that will be dropping tomorrow, but tomorrow is the day before this episode drops. Xavier McKinney comes from the Giants, one of the Eagles' big, rivalries.
Yeah, that'll be another curious one too, because initial point here is that McKinney was brought here to play the deep safety role in this defense, but if any of the rookies, and this again gets back to the whole, we won't dig into this too much, but this does get back to the whole Anthony Johnson Jr. point where it's like now you're counting on a rookie to have a big role in a season opening game and stuff. So yeah, it'll be kind of interesting to see what Hafley does. This is one of those where if these two teams were to happen to play like in the playoffs again, I think that the matchups are going to be way different than they are now because rookies will be fully indoctrinated. Hafley will have a much better grasp on what guys are good and can't do or what they've learned to do over the course of a season. So I do think it'll be more quote-unquote straight up for Friday's game, but like we both alluded to, I do want to see how quickly and how willing Hafley is to make adjustments on the fly because this Eagles offense has more than enough talent to force adjustments. I'll be really impressed by the defense if they are able to take the fight to Philly and snuff out this offense for the majority of even a half of this game. So I know we're focusing on the Eagles offense right now, but I do think the best defense for the Packers is for the Green Bay offense to get rolling and score a bunch of points. So with that, we will segue into the Philly defense where just like the offense, it's a line of scrimmage unit and their front seven remains very potent. Yeah, Fletcher Cox has retired, but Jalen Carter looks more than ready to step into that role as their 3 technique. I know that they're under Fangio, so they're more of a 3-4 base, but expect Carter to get a lot of pass rushing opportunities on the interior. Kind of like how Akeem Hicks maximized his career under Fangio in Chicago's defense from, what was that, 2018 through 21 or whatever before Fangio went to Denver. So I expect Carter to play that kind of a role. They still have a bunch of different options on the edges. They have a mix of power in Josh Sweat and Brandon Graham and speed guys in Huff and Nolan Smith. And Devin White, I still don't think he's nearly as good as he or some people think he is, but he's still pretty athletic. He can still fly around the field. And if that D-line and the edges are able to keep him clean, we saw what he did against us. Granted, it was 4 years ago, but still, we saw his sideline to sideline range when he does see the play well, and he's able to just fly to the ball, and he just completely neutered our run game when we played the Bucs in 2020. So they've got a lot of athleticism, a lot of skill on that front seven, and they kind of need it because their secondary, they've got some names, but they're not all proven, and the proven one, even the proven ones like a Darius Slay, he's getting up there. I think this is his 11th season already at this point, which is kind of weird because it doesn't feel like he's been in the NFL that long. Yeah. So there you go. Kind of thing. Yeah, he's a 2013 pick. So, but yeah, it's like, shoot, like it was 12 seasons ago that he came into the league. So it'll be important for the Packers O-line to be on top of its game because the key for us, just like it is for Philly, is that O-line being able to handle whatever pressure the defensive front puts on it so that we can get as many guys into the pass routes as possible. Because I do think in coverage, Musgrave and Kraft are going to be able to create mismatches. And the number of receivers, like, we don't have someone who, at least at this point, has proven to be the equivalent of a Devonta Smith or A.J. Brown. But I do think our top 5 to 6 receivers are better and more potent to throw against what Philly has at corner than A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith against Jair and even Stokes at this point. I know that a lot of people are going to kind of roll their eyes at that, but I really do think that there is a little bit, it at least comes out more even than you'd think it would when you kind of say, like, who has the advantage if you compare the Philly receivers against our secondary and then the Green Bay receivers against the Philly secondary. Because, like I said, you look at that Philly secondary and it's Darius Slay, and then they brought C.J. Gardner-Johnson back at safety, but he's not really a deep safety. He's more of a box safety. And then everyone else in that secondary, you're kind of like, okay, I've heard of him, but is he really that good? And that's guys like Reed Blankenship Calais Ringo, and then it's rookies in, highly touted rookies in Quinyon Mitchell and excuse me, and Cooper DeJean, but they're still NFL rookies. So there's, just like we talk about how the Packers secondary, safety room is going to do this year. There's a lot of variability on how that Eagles secondary is going to do, especially against a unit like our receiving core that can throw a lot of different curveballs at you by just throwing different guys on the field to create mismatches. So, like I said, as most games do, this game is going to come down to which O-line is able to establish and assert itself, because the O-line that does that first is going to create rhythm for their offense. And especially with it being week one, every team is trying to figure out who it is as much as it's trying to figure out its opponent. And whoever can gain traction first, especially with this being an oddball night. I think they said this is the first time a team has played on a Friday night since 1970 or something like that. And the fact that it is also an international game where both teams are coming off of a 10-hour flight. And I think, Philly's is probably longer because Green Bay's flight is 10 hours. So Philly's probably got a longer travel day involved. So whoever can kind of get the screws tightened in their dome faster is going to be the one to benefit quicker. So, just as much as Philly's O-line is pretty experienced, Green Bay's O-line is pretty equally experienced. You're only replacing one starter at right guard, but everyone else has been around the block, and more importantly, been around the block together. So whichever unit can gain traction first is going to be absolutely key for this matchup. That's the thing with week one, is it's like, yes, the matchup matters, the paper matchup does matter, but there is an element of chaos that's in week one that isn't there for the rest of the season, because guys haven't played a lot. Guys aren't necessarily in full conditioning. They're in shape, but they're not in play a 60-minute game shape kind of thing. So, players are going to be tested and stuff, and it's not it's not a beauty contest. It's just score more points than the opponent, and it doesn't matter if you drive that car across the finish line or drag it across. It's just get across with more points than the other guys. So it might turn into a barroom brawl kind of thing. And I do want to see how this Packers team reacts if that's the case. It's a little bit of a trend with LaFleur that his team doesn't always respond well when their nose gets dirtied and bloodied a little bit. So it would be nice that they're able to answer the bell if this game turns ugly and physical, not like dirty ugly, but just like muddled and disjointed ugly kind of thing. And then on special teams, Jake Elliott is their kicker. A little bit of a rough preseason, but he only kicked like 5 field goals. Career 86% kicker, 85.5 between 40 to 49 yards, and 70% from 50 plus. So good, strong leg. And honestly, the return men, I don't know too much about. So hopefully Bisaccia will be able to, get a little work done on, be able to stifle their return game. Our return teams will be able to gain some ground and work through, just win the field position battle. But my keys to the game, and Joe, I know that I kind of threw these out there, but let me know if you think there's anything else. But like I said, this is a meat and potatoes game because it's week one. So it's going to be, you're going to be like, oh, gee, thanks for telling me that. But the 4 keys that I've got to this week one is tackle well. As Joe mentioned, the Eagles have a lot of talent at the skill positions, and they're going to be able to spread Green Bay's defense out. So you got to tackle when you have the opportunity, because all those guys can, from Brown to Smith to Goddard to Barkley, if they get the ball in space, they can take it the distance. So you got to tackle. I know that whether it's finishing turnover opportunities on defense or if there are shot plays, Green Bay's got to convert those. You can't, we've seen it as recently as a couple years ago where they set up a Christian Watson double move and he drops the ball and it just takes the air out of the balloon for the Packers, from that point forward. So you got to take advantage of your opportunities. take care of the football, be the one to create turnovers on defense, don't turn the ball over on offense. And like I alluded to with the special teams, win the field position battle. And I don't know too much about this Brazil stadium. I don't know what like the field is, but you've heard where when football teams play on non-football fields that sometimes that other sport style stadium, like the turf is softer or it does this or they stitch the grass together differently. So you want to be in plus territory or as close to plus territory as much as you can be. So big week for Whelan. Hopefully he doesn't have to do much this week because we're scoring touchdowns or kicking field goals, and potentially big week for Narveson to get points on the board. But Joe, did you have anything else besides those?
No. Really
like
not. I mean, that covers.
Yeah, like I said, it's nothing too extravagant, nothing too imaginative. It really just is, because we don't, like we said, we haven't see any idea of what we think Hafley's defense will look like is based off of how he ran it at Boston College. He has different and better players here, and so you'd like to think that Boston College is a Div 1 school, but it's not a top tier Div 1 school. So his defense was made to cover deficiencies in other position groups, whereas in the NFL, I know that they're trying to figure out the linebacker and safety room, but even still, he has better athletes relative to what he had on those BC teams. So we don't really know what that defense is. And then on offense, the big question is, of course, how is Love going to start the season? Are we going to find out that he gets out of the gates quickly, or is he a guy that has a little bit of a ramp up period, which some people complain about, but that's the case for a lot of quarterbacks. A lot of them start the season off a little slow. Rodgers was kind of like that half the time, where you're kind of like, he's barely averaging 200 yards and he's kind of like at 1 or 2 touchdowns a game, and Packers are scoring like 24 points a game. And it's not until like we get into October and stuff that you're like, shit, here's the 30 points per game offense that we were expecting all offseason and all. So that's why, Long Luke coming back, that's why these keys to the game are the very basics. You got to just win at the basics to get this win in week 1, because if you take care of the ball, take care of field position, tackle, and just convert your big play opportunities, that's how you're going to, whether you blow out or squeak out a win, that's how you get wins in week 1.
Yeah, I mean, week 1 is always a big game for everybody. So, all you can hope for is they come out and play come out of it with a victory and no injuries.
Yeah. And like, in terms of how you want to see this game go, you want to see them making like mental mistakes. You don't want to see like, oh God, like we've been sold on this being the fastest Packers defense ever, and they look slow compared to you don't want to just see like, oh man, like that dude can't play dead kind of thing and stuff, or like our linebackers still look like they're running in mud and all that kind of stuff. So, I can live with mental mistakes in week 1, but you want to see them push through those and make enough plays to win. But we move to what's usually your baby, Joe, with the over-unders. What do you got for this week?
The first one, Josh Jacobs rushing yards over-under 63.5.
I'm going to go over. Something that Westendorf brought up on Pack-A-Day is that, which is a little surprising about this Eagles front, and it's a lot of the same players, is as bad as the Packers were in average yards allowed per rush, the Eagles were like the next worst team or something like that, or they weren't very far away from the Packers. So I do think that if they're able to, possess the ball, that Jacobs is going, it might not be the most efficient, but I do think he's going to get to like 80 yards rushing on Friday.
The way the injuries seem to be in the running back room at the moment, I'm going to say they're going to have to rely on him. So he's easily going to go over just because of the reliance of him throughout the game.
I know LaFleur has kind of said like he hopes to keep the same system he had with Jones, where he was trying to limit him, but I think where you're trying to make a statement and it is an international game, you're the only game that night, you play your stars a little bit because you do kind of want them to get in shape and stuff. And I do think Jacobs is going to pop one like 15 to 20 yard run on Friday. And that's kind of to be a fresh air, because I forget what it was last year. We didn't have a 10+ yard run until like week 6 or something. It was, I remember it was like they struggled to get an explosive run for a while last season. Either they didn't get one for the first 5 or 6 weeks, or like they had one in week 2 and then it took like a month to get the next one or something like that. So I think Jacob is going to break at least one on Friday.
Got some of these over-unders from gambling sites. So these are what the betting people think. So over-under Jordan Love passing touchdowns 1.5.
I'm going to say over. Just because I think if they get in tight on the goal line, I think they're going to play action into touchdowns. So I'll go over.
I've been trying to think on what I didn't like it at first, and looked up what the under is for his touchdowns, or not touchdowns, his passing yards. It's like over under 245.5.
Right. Which is pretty high.
So if it's actually 257.5 yards. So 257. So if he's going to go with that many yards, even if it's slightly under that, you would have to think that he's going to have more than 2 touchdowns. So, and what really bugged me about the over-unders that these guys were putting out is they must be thinking the Packers are going to play from behind. Because unless they fully go scorched earth and just are nonstop killing the Eagles, I don't see them easily putting up 200, him easily putting up 257.
Yeah. Like you said, unless it's against like a prevent look kind of thing. So yeah, I agree with you there.
So if it does, then you'd think he'd have to go over. So I would take the over too, but I think, like I said, they're going to have to rely on Jacobs a little bit more with the other guys ailing. So you see it where Jacobs. Well, you also got to throw in touch passes. So you got to think that Jaden Reed's going to at least have one with one of those touch passes.
Yeah.
So next one I got is Green Bay half. Green Bay defense sacks 2.5.
I'm going under. I think not, because I do think that particularly Rashawn, Preston, and Lucas, I think they're going to get some good pressures, but because of the Eagles' run game and because of the fact that Hurts is a running quarterback, I think he's going to run out of a bunch of sacks, and I think that Hafley is going to have him playing kind of more of a contained system than like a just pure, like if it was Kirk Cousins back there, like just bum rush him and get him down on the ground kind of game plan. So I got the under on that one.
I'll take the over, but just by a half a sack. So I'm going to say 3 sacks on there, and I think at least one of them is going to come from an outside source other than the edge rushers or the defensive line. I think what's going to happen is Jalen is going to roll out like he's going to run the speed guys, whether it's Jair, the way he did against Cousins that got him the safety a couple of years ago, or Stokes with his speed, or one of the speed guys is just going to come streaking in and keep him from even getting to the line of scrimmage. So I think the defensive line are going to have a couple, but I think either one of the speedster linebackers or one of the DBs is going to have one too. The last one is Jalen Hurts INTs over under 1. I said 1. Normally they set him at 1.5, but it's either he's going to get one or he's not going to get one. It's the defense, like I said, goes scorched earth. I don't see him giving up too many of them.
Yeah, I think that head says under, but the fan in me wants to say over, because kind of like you're saying with the sacks, if they're over, that means that they're winning the game kind of thing. So screw it. I'm going to say over because let's be optimistic.
I mean, I would say push because I would say that he's going to at least throw one, whether it's a tip, whether it's whatever. And it's kind of the same way with Jordan Love. That's the kind of quarterback that they are. They're not going to give up a ton of them, but they are going to give up the occasional one.
Yeah, they are going to take some risks with the ball. Like, more calculated, but they will put the ball in harm's way.
And I think that's going to be another emphasis of this Hafley defense is takeaways, which we've had a real lack thereof from this team for many years.
You do get that.
Weird.
You do get that. Yeah, you do get that sort of there is the vibe like there was when Capers first came in, where it's like, yeah, like we're trying to give weird pressure looks and weird coverage looks because we want to create interception opportunities and stuff. So yeah, I do get that feeling too, where they're like, you can't sell out for it, but that is the goal of Hafley's system, is to create opportunities to take the ball away.
Right, and I was going to say is it's weird that they haven't, because they do have ball hawks. Jair is a ball hawk. Six is a ball hawk. Keyshawn is going to get something. Xavier McKinney's a ball hawk. Carrington in college was a ball hawk. These guys have the ability to do it. The opportunity hasn't been there for them. So I think they're going to get one. So I guess if I went with this, it would be a push.
All right. And that's going to carry us through to the end of our coverage. Anything else you got for this one? I know we're trying to keep this as short and sweet as possible because Joe needs to get some sleep working double 12s this week. But Joe, anything else from you?
Not really. Like I said, and then like I said on our other episode, this is not the game that I would love to start with. I would rather it be against a rival than the Eagles, because it would have more of a chance if it was Detroit, even, because that would be a hell of a game. It is what it is. They've got football going.
Yeah, and I do think it helps that I think it's better for the Packers that it's an international game, like it's a neutral site game as opposed to in the link where, Philly guys are not sleeping in their own beds like they probably would have expected to and all. So, it adds to the weirdness for everybody. So everyone hopefully is a little bit wrong-footed, and hopefully, like I said, Green Bay can take advantage before the Eagles can. Yeah. But so yeah, like we said, we do want to try and keep these preview ones a little bit shorter and sweeter than our Sunday recap ones. So that'll do it for us tonight. Check out ohanapackers.org, the website, streams of all of our episodes, all of Cheese Talk episodes. Blog posts are going up. Carlos is releasing an article soon. I say soon because I'm all thrown off on the recording this Tuesday. I think his drops on Wednesday and this episode is coming out Thursday. So hopefully you'll have read that by the time you're listening to this episode. Check out the merch on the website. Support us, please. Get Joe some better internet. Get me better internet and other things. The ability to go to some games and meet up in person. And also to bring you better content. That's the one that I should lead with. That's right. That's what the merch is for, is to pay content creators, not just the two of us. Please be following the podcast on Twitter at Ohana_Packers. Like I said, I'll start putting out some polls this week just to kind of decide what to go over in the pregame space, how we're gonna fill our recap, and everything in between. Do we live tweet the game? Especially because there's the rumor that reporters in Brazil won't be able to tweet updates on the game. So we'll kind of see how that goes for Friday's game. And then, as like we always say, if we do have any sort of drawings, you've got to be following the show's Twitter account. So at Ohana_Packers. Follow the podcast on your favorite podcasting apps. Give us a like and a subscribe. We really appreciate it. And all your comments, positive and negative, we want to hear them. Packers are ready to kick off the 2024 season. And like Joe said, football is back and we're ready for it. So here's to a good 2024 season. Let's hope the Packers get it off on the right foot. Go Pack, go, and aloha.